afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, it is a pleasure to have you today. Welcome to the SA Property Investors Network Coffee Chat. And I want to say I am super excited for this episode because we are talking to trailblazers and property investors discussing something that is on the rise as we currently speak, and that is semigration and urbanization of farmland. Now, historically, we always understood that people want to move to pardon me, places of employment, so CBDs, urban hubs. But because of the current rise in work from home or hybrids or shared working spaces, that no longer is the forefront in terms of commercial spaces. And because of that, we then understand that people don't have a need to live in city centers or highly industrialized places, and they are now choosing to migrate, be it semigration in terms of relocating to more fun areas, if you if you have for like there were better words, such as Cape Town or any other coastal area, or urbanization of farmland, where people will move away from the city just to have a more understanding and more quaint living. And we have two individuals who are going to be discussing and unpacking this phenomena a little later. But what I want to do is, as always, I'd love to know where you're watching me from, be it from Johannesburg or Cape Town. I know we also have international. We once had somebody viewing us from Belgium, from Kenya. Just let me know in the chat box. If you're watching me from Facebook and or YouTube, please let me know in the chat box, and also like and share. And leave a comment on whether you find these coffee chats enjoyable, knowledgeable, and informative. For those of you who are watching me for the first time, I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us. Just let me know where you are joining us from and how did you find out about us? Because if you didn't know, we are the SA Property Investors Network, aka hashtag SAPIN, and we do something that's pretty simple. We connect, we are like-minded individuals in terms of the property space, so we teach, we enrich, and we grow. That's it in the simplest of terms. So I'm going to be watching you guys right now on the chat box just to find out exactly where you guys are viewing me from. Okay, we have Jonathan. He's from Cape Town. And he too is semi-graduate. So he literally is somebody who's experienced the topic that we're going to be talking about today. And I'd love to hear from everybody else where you guys are viewing me from. And if this is your first time, please just give me a thumbs up. If you're a bit too shy to actually comment, but I would love it if you commented, and you also, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, you liked and shared. Now, we have Eric from Cape Town. We have Jerry Skosana. He is currently in Nairobi, Kenya. So we touch on all facets and all places. So I am super excited because all of my lovely ladies from Joburg, all those of you who want to fly down for the annual Women's Day event, is happening on the 12th of August. Ladies, I cannot understand how you guys have not finished all of the bookings. So we still have just a little bit more tickets. So you can go to our website and book yourself for the tickets for the annual Women's Day event. It is jam-packed. There's prizes, there's gifts, there's games, there's knowledge, there's just, each one teach one. We're going to be having phenomenal speakers such as Nondumiso Ngapai, Buyeso Ramukopo, and Dr. Mavis, as well as Saskia Cole. And they are trailblazers who have more than 30 years experience each in their desired sectors. So we have phenomenal women that are going to be speaking to other phenomenal women, and we have an amazing jam-packed show. If you do not know what it's like, please just go to our YouTube channel and you'll see the actual video from last year's one, which is equally as awesome. So please get your tickets. That's happening on Saturday, the 12th of August. I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. And as you know, I will be your host. Right, as we keep it moving, as I said, we have two amazing investors, and that is by the name of Akashini Weimers and Jade Barkhuysen. Each one is an expert in these topics: semigration and urbanization of farmland, or urbanization. Like I said before, stereotypically, we always moved towards the employment, and because now we are no longer obliged in a heavy manner to always be by your workplace, because like I said, we have hybrids, we have work from home, we have shared working spaces. People are now moving in different sectors, and because of that, it is making the property market kind of have a little bit of rustle and bustle, which we always love to realize what's happening to the current market. And like I said, if you're watching us for the first time, please just say hi, like a little thumbs up, and just let me know where you're watching us from. However, without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests for today, and that is Akashini and Jade. Lady and gentlemen, how are you this afternoon?
Good, thank you so much, Kali. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fantastic.
Kelly, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So we're going to get straight to it. Guys, as always, please put all of your questions that you have in the comment box for our guests, and I'll make sure that they answer them. But I'm going to start it off with semigration. It's a new phenomenon. I don't think it has been as prevalent as it has in the past couple of years. I think you would agree, Akashni. But I think the one and only question that we always want to know before anything is, why do you think people are semigrating?
Absolutely. So, just to quickly give a brief definition also of semigration for people who maybe don't know what it is, Kali, it is basically like immigration, but instead of going overseas, you want to go to a different province in South Africa. And the reason for that is because when COVID hit, we reached this massive tipping point, right, where people said, they started to value a lot of, different types of things and found out that, if they moved to some of these coastal towns, they would actually have a much better quality of life, something by the sea, something where they could have a little bit more of a relaxed living. And that has caused a massive trend of people leaving, environments such as Johannesburg and maybe even Durban or maybe other parts of the country to come down predominantly through to the Garden route as well as the West Coast as well. And that has given them the opportunity to have that relaxed life, and see themselves living by the beach, for many years to come.
Okay, and would you say, in terms of urbanization of farmland, Jay, do you think that reasoning would also suffice for the urbanization of farmland?
Yeah, Kashni, I think they obviously, sorry, Kali, I think they're obviously a little bit different. And urbanization of farmland obviously has various things that needs to be in place before you can do that. Specifically, you need to do developments, right? If it's agriculturally zoned land, you need to go through quite a process to get the right zoning and be able to urbanize or develop those areas. And different municipalities have different processes that you need to follow as developers to develop those areas. But yeah, that's also a very exciting space to be in. You're sort of moving away from the inner cities. You sort of have a better lifestyle. I think that's what really triggers semigration specifically. But also the slight urbanization of farmland. There's more space. We're obviously currently busy with such a development. We were building houses in an area that used to be farmland, and in fact, it took about 5 or 6 years for the municipality to approve such a development. So there's so many things, environmental impact studies, geotechnical studies, and it just takes a very long time. So I think if you have a vision of improving people's lives, you can get there, but it's not a quick thing. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, and so back to Akashi in terms of semigration, like you say, it's like immigration, but you're just moving about within the country. I think this is one that's actually quite important, and is, what should people consider before they semigrate?
Absolutely. So, Kari, just to give some background on this as well, in a corporate working space, we've always been hearing for many years that you can do remote working, right? It's possible. You don't need to necessarily go to an office. You can actually be in the comfort of your own home as long as you have a laptop, an internet connection, a good cell phone, that kind of thing, right? But it's never really been tested before. It is something that COVID helped us to realize that we either do it or could we not do it, right? And since there's lots of global trends and stuff around this as well, and people having more access to the internet and learning about those trends from overseas, other countries, they're also realizing that they can ask to work remotely more often. So if you're a semigrant, or if you're looking to actually semigrate to a different province, I would say that a big consideration for you would be whether working remotely is actually a sustainable endeavor for you and the long-term plan of your company. Because ESCOM is obviously still a fact, and load shedding is a big problem for our country, obviously. and that has actually caused some of the reverse, of that as well. So whereas people thought that they could actually happily semigrate, and though it's possible to work in these towns like Gordons Bay, like Knysna, like George, etc., they found themselves also going back. So if you're a semigrant and can work remotely, I think it's ideal for you to be able to do so. But you'd have to consider things like, is there enough energy? Is there enough services? And things that small towns traditionally don't have, and would still need to develop. So you might be comfortable with the beach, but you might not be completely comfortable with the convenience aspect.
Mhm. And Jade, for you in terms of the urbanization of farmland, because it's relatively new, unlike semigration, similar to how Akashini explained it, you're moving from, let's say, Joburg to Cape Town. Cape Town is already established in of itself, right? So you can just pick a section of it and then be like, okay, I'll find property here. Whereas urbanization has a similar undertone where people are moving to more better quality of life areas, but there's other factors that come into play. So if you are the type of person that go, well, I think I want to live, with nature, and I do have internet, and I can get a UPS, for example. What then would you say people would need to consider prior to moving to, let's say, an area that has been developed for urbanization of a farmland?
Well, I think lifestyle, security, schooling for children, those are all kinds of things that play into it, right? Very important. And it also depends how far or where is the agricultural land situated. With our development, it's 25 minutes outside of Port Elizabeth. So for people from Cape Town and Joburg, that's really not a far drive. For PE people, we're sort of still getting used to that kind of drive, but it's close enough to a big city to have all the amenities. So your children can still even school in the city, but you're actually just living outside of the city within 25 minutes. So I think lifestyle plays a really big part. And as Akashini mentioned there, the services need to be in place. Do you have fiber internet connection? It's very job specific, right? Not everyone can work remotely. But still, if you're just outside of the city, in a nice sort of rural development, it gives you that balance between the lifestyle and being close enough to schools and amenities. And I think it's a really nice way of expanding developments, expanding our communities. And it's a really exciting space, I think. I think urbanization in general is always still going to be there. We've got a company like Tough, the Urban Housing Fund, that's one of our sponsors at SAPN, and they really specialize in inner city developments. They're not going anywhere. So even urbanization is still there. People are always going to flock to places like Johannesburg because the money's there, there's jobs there. So I guess it's really just dependent on the individual themselves, what kind of work they do, what kind of business they have, and what kind of lifestyle they want to live.
Alrighty then. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for those viewing us, just to let you know, you can put your questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure that our guests answer it as we keep it going. Back to semigration, Akashini. I think what you mentioned is that there's a few key places in Cape Town that are kind of booming in terms of semigration. But would you say holistically in South Africa, are there key provinces where individuals are considering going to, or like these are the hotspots where you're seeing a lot of traffic in terms of semigration?
Absolutely. I think the Western case is absolutely booming with semigration all the way along the Garden Route and towards the Eastern Cape as well. So that's where the bulk of the semigration takes place because, as Jade also mentioned, it's safety, it's a more communal type of lifestyle. It is individuals who may be retirees. Maybe they feel like they're like-minded and they can now get together in a community where they live together and enjoy that. Or maybe it's remote workers who have that common interest in mind. But if I could pinpoint some really great towns in the Western Cape that where semigration is taking place, it would be your Gordons Bay, it would be your Strand, it would be also along the West Coast as well. So areas like Langebaan and all of that, St. Helena's Bay, all those kinds of Bay, Paternoster. These are very popular tourist attraction towns, with a lot of fun activities and lovely food as well. So that's where it is. And if I could just point out, I actually live here in Gordons Bay, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It is truly gorgeous. And you're finding a lot of developers now coming to the party, like Baldwin Properties, for example, that are building massive developments, and we can see a lot of people moving into that area. So I'll just highlight those towns.
Okay, Akashi, we get it. You're trying to make us jealous. It's fine.
And also just to add to that, Kelly,
By
just
the beach, living our best life. But some of us are Joburgers, true and
I
through.
love Joburg. I love Joburg. I do.
You did miss out. I was feeling a little FOMO there. I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. However, something that's equally amazing is, Jade, you were talking about the development you guys are currently doing in PE, and it's essentially one of the first ones of its kind. Do you mind just giving us like a roundabout understanding of what exactly is happening, and for those who are interested in like moving to an urbanized farmland?
yeah, so Kelly, it's just outside of PE, about 25 minutes. It's between Port Elizabeth or Tebega and St. Francis Bay or Jeffreys Bay. Most people know either one of those little towns. And it's really one of South Africa's first rural new towns, is what we're calling it. It's completely off the grid with water. The Eastern Cape specifically, we've been struggling with water shortages. We've had some rain in the last couple of weeks, which has been absolutely awesome. Our dam levels have filled up quite nicely, but we're still not there. So being off the grid is a big drive for this specific development. As I say, we're 100% off the grid with water. And moving towards electricity. We still are dependent on municipal electricity. However, each property that gets built there has to have a certain element of solar on it. And I think that's really important for South Africa as a country to move towards, right? We want to be as independent as we can, so we don't have to have downtime in our businesses, not have internet, those kind of things. So yeah, we're building houses, residential houses out there. There's also a commercial and industrial component. There's a little area we call the village center. So there'll be shops, there'll be, you could literally have everything you need on the development. And we're just across the road from a very, very good private school called Woodridge College. So we're finding a lot of people from overseas, a lot of Joburg people moving there, sending their children across the road to the private school. But it really is an inclusive community. I must just add that. So anyone can come stay there, live there. It's really an amazing place that used to be a dairy farm, actually. So as I mentioned, it took 5 to 6 years to actually get the zoning in place to build the first house. So quite a process. And there's still, in fact, there's just over 400 cows that graze on the agricultural land. So we've actually made sure that we can still have animals on the development and not crowd it like a normal urban development would be, right? Normally, urban developments are all about how many units can you build in the allocated space. This is more about lifestyle and building the right amount of units and having the mix between agricultural land and also conservation land, because there are areas that will never be able to build in. It's part of the conservancy. So yeah, really excited about that development.
All right then. And as we go to the viewers for questions, and this one can go to both Akashini and Jade, but I'll start with you, Akashini. And Daniel wants to know what investment opportunities does semigration bring to the investor? Like, is it a buy-to-let, converting, agricultural land? Like, what exactly would you say from an investor's perspective is are the opportunities with people semigrating?
Perfect. So when you think about that question about investing, as an investor, you always want to think about what's the long-term demand of the place, because depending on how that goes, it's going to drive the price up of your property, and that's great, right? We want that property to appreciate, and we want those rental yields to also get larger and larger as time goes by. So what I can say is that from an investment perspective, anywhere from even an ordinary bachelor flat, it could be a unit inside of an ordinary complex. It could be a house that you could use for multi-lets. There's so many different properties that you can actually look at, right? But two comes to mind. The one is the multi-let that is quite abundant in this area that needs a lot of refurbishment, and you can pick that up for a good price. And you can rent that out to a family, because there are plenty families looking for good space, right? Space, as everybody knows, is becoming smaller and smaller as time goes by. So, obviously that would be a big draw. And the other one is the normal units that are being built. So we have a lot of what is called the eco lifestyle. And we're seeing Baldwin build a lot of properties like that in the area as well. It entailed, things like it's got gas. So, any preventative load shedding type of measures they put in place, things like they'll install more solar panels, things like that, any energy efficient type of things. But then with that, you got to also bear in mind that the levies are pretty high. Anytime you're living near a coastal town, it's going to be higher than average. So that is a consideration. However, you can build that into your monthly billing for the tenant if you are a landlord. And that, is obviously a huge draw. So people will definitely pay for that because it offers the security, the lifestyle, no load shedding, dramas, all of those kinds of things. So big draw for investors in this area.
Mm-hmm. And Jade, in terms of the urbanization of farmland, what would you say is the key grab for investors?
I think lifestyle, obviously, if you're moving out there, also something like Airbnb is a strategy that could work really well with both the semigration, of course, depending on where you're moving to or investing in. Yeah, I think the urbanization of farmland is very much about lifestyle and security. Um, that for me hits those points. With semigration, if I look at small towns like George, for instance, the growth of that place is absolutely unbelievable. You cannot build quick enough for the demand. And that presents a really nice opportunity for investors because the chances of the value of properties going up in George, for instance, and Mossel Bay and St. Francis Bay is really, really good. So if you got in there early, you're smiling, but it's definitely not too late to benefit from that. Airbnb strategies are definitely going to work very well in those areas. Of course, you need to look at the specific towns you're investing in because George has got a really strong university. Student accommodation might even be an option there. A place like Mossel Bay, for instance, you're not going to do student accommodation because there's not much in terms of university, but there's lifestyle, so maybe Airbnb or even a multi-let might work. So all these little towns across the coast, it's just incredible to see how the values have gone up and how the demand goes up. And then I see Daniel also mentioned over there what investment opportunities does immigration bring to investor, but it's converting agricultural land. So it's also budget dependent, right? You're not going to go and try and convert agricultural land unless you've got a couple of million lined up in funding over the next few years. So I think it's budget dependent. If you're a new investor, maybe Airbnb, a small flat, is the really the nice place to start. Or rent to rent strategy. Maybe you rent out a flat and get permission to sublet. Really nice, easy, not an easy way, but an easier way to get into the property market.
Hmm. That's actually very interesting that you mentioned that. And just to also say this, we have our resident golden nugget in terms of facilities management. Bevan is about to join us, and he will give his input in terms of, from a facilities perspective, what does immigration mean for properties, especially if you are in rehab or you're in the increasing boom. But Daniel just put a very interesting question, and please put your questions in the chat box as we're going through them. We'll make sure that our guests answer these questions. But Daniel just put in a very interesting one, and this one can be for Akashini. And he asked, do you think Cape Town can keep up with the amounts of people seeking accommodation? My biggest fear is that it could give rise to a lot of informal settlements. As we know, there is currently a taxi strike, which has caused chaos in this. So from an investor's perspective, do you think they can actually keep up?
Yes, so the city of Cape Town regularly posts these, I follow them on LinkedIn and all of that as well. And they believe that they can absolutely keep up with the demand that is happening. So time will tell because as you mentioned, Khali, these strikes and things are not easy, even countries like the UK and stuff have to stop their planes from coming through when things like that happen. And it's massive, right? So it has its pros and cons. Will the city be able to manage the demand? Yes, it will. Also, another thing is that from a job perspective, people who semigrate down here are not necessarily needing a brand new job. They're coming from Joburg, they already have a job. And so they're remote working, right? So it's not putting that pressure on the market. But that having been said, we are getting a lot of companies like Amazon and that building up here, and they're definitely helping with the infrastructure. And with that, it's going to attract more developers. I'm also seeing a lot of companies coming from other provinces and moving their operations down here and getting more work. So that's obviously going to cause for more jobs to be created, and more services to be given as well.
Now that's actually very, very interesting. So, one of the few questions that also got asked is that how do I pick my area to ensure I don't buy into an area that's negatively impacted by semigration? This is also something that we also need to discuss in terms of, is there such a thing as negative impact by semigration? Can semigration actually lead to the negative instead of the current positive that it's giving?
Yes, I think so. So how do I pick my area to ensure that it's not, that negative sort of impact? Um, it's a tough one when you choose to semigrate down here, right? And this comes from who is actually semigrating. And right now, it's actually the majority are remote workers, young people, right, who have that laptop, who can set up from anywhere and they can work from anywhere in the world. Those are the types of people. The other people are people come from overseas who can do that very same thing, right? So they're actually immigrating into the province. Now you've got a mesh of that community. But then you also have a lot of retirees and that sort of thing as well, right? So the way that they would choose areas to semigrate to would be based on that lifestyle, that ease of peace of mind, living quality relaxation. So from that point of view, the towns that are available to offer that for them is still quite abundant. And we're not seeing, I'm not seeing any negative sort of trends that are too overwhelming. Obviously, there are, but I would say that on average, these towns are actually really booming in terms of what it can do from that perspective. And so the more services and stuff come into the province, the more that we build up, the more that we can accommodate for all of those people, the better it's going to be. So for me, if you have to ask me personally, I actually see a lot of investment potential in those areas rather than the negative trends moving equally in proportion to those positive trends.
Okay. And so with that, I want to say thank you and welcome to Bevan, who's going to give us our golden nugget. Bevan, how are you, sir?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really enjoying listening to today's show. It's such great value we're getting from this.
Fantastic. So we're talking about semigration and urbanization of farmland, Bevan. And you, from a facilities perspective, what would you say the little inputs are in terms of, either investors that invested early, as Jade had mentioned that if you got in early, you're smiling right now, but now we have a huge issue with demand. So from a facilities perspective, what things would you think you'd need to put in place to kind of accommodate this rise of demand in terms of semigration or developments that are currently happening with the urbanization of farmland?
There's some great opportunities out there as a result of semigration, urbanization, etc. Because what it means is when there's change in the market, it means there's opportunities. So, for instance, maybe throwing in an example of something that we don't consider as semigration, where we've got people leaving normal residential areas and moving into gated communities, complexes, and that sort of thing. So that's an example of semigration, and whether that's just in their same town, they're basically upgrading their lifestyles, etc. So I think that's something to consider, that there's that kind of semigration that's happening. But for me, the great opportunity that I see from this is if you as a homeowner are looking at moving to semigrate, so whether you're going the full distance to Cape Town or nice sunny Ballito where the water's a little bit warm, me being a Durbanite, I can plug that a bit more. But so if you're looking at moving yourself, a lot of people tend to just go like, listen, I'm too afraid of having tenants. I'm just going to sell off my property and I'm going to move. I think it is an opportunity for you to pause and go, listen, the property I have at the moment is in a great area. There's potential for me to get a good market rental for it. I might have bought it 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I've then, like, there's equity in it, etc. And my bond isn't so high. My rates are low because it's the municipality hasn't valued it at the current market value. So in that situation, you need to reevaluate and go, listen, my emotional response is to sell the property and not have to deal with it. And especially if you're moving to Cape Town and your property is in Joburg, there's a huge emotional fear that comes with that. Say, I don't want to have to deal with the issues. Whereas us, and we're in the space of the SA Property Investors Network, where we are putting on this hat of how do I invest in property. So even if you are remote from your property, how do you make it an investment property? And that's where my golden nuggets for today is, when you are buying properties or investment properties, and be it whether you're taking advantage of those people going to a semigration space, or whether you're converting a current property into a rental property, it's really so important to take the emotion out of it in your decisions on finishes and all those things, and make it so it's a maintenance efficient, so it's easy to clean, easy to maintain, etc. And B, make sure the administration is as low as possible. So if you are remote, so you're living in Cape Town and you're now trying to look after your rental property in Joburg, you need to make the administration almost turn into no admin for yourself. So whether you're outsourcing that management, the great one that I always recommend is putting in prepaid electricity meters, prepaid water meters. So you're not having to send someone to take those meter readings, etc. And then down to finishes. So when you think about your paints, go with a paint that's washable. So make sure, like, you're using a semi-sheen or a sheen paint that is easy for someone to come in and wash. And you're not in that position where you're now having to send a whole painting crew in after every tenant turnover. You're just sending a cleaning crew in. They're going, they're washing the walls, a couple of hours, and the place is sparkling again. So I think that's an important thing. The next item that I would sort of mention on an admin's or maintenance perspective is your garden. Make sure your garden is easy to maintain. So especially for rent properties, you want it to be easy enough for you to just say, listen, Mr. Tenant, you're not looking after the garden. It's affecting the value of my property. I'm sending in a garden service to come cut the grass every 2 weeks, and I'm going to charge you for it. So you want to set it up so it's easy for you to pivot like that. So those are my golden tips for today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Bevan, in terms of your golden tips. Always appreciate them. And as we wrap up, I want to know from each one of you. So Jade, I guess we'll start with you in terms of what are your parting words for those who want to join or want to be part of, urbanization of a farmland?
So, Kelly, I think it's important to do your homework, first of all. Services are usually a big thing. If the farmland is quite far outside of a city centre, is the municipality going to contribute to putting the services in? The development that I'm busy with, the developer himself actually had to put all the services in. Water, electricity, roads, everything. So make sure you understand that. Obviously, you do get agricultural land that's a lot closer to the city. So speak to a good town planner. Make sure that the town planner understands the area and they know what it's going to take to develop that area. I think that's a good starting point. So that at least you can run the correct feasibilities. If you're moving into an existing development, it's important to look at things like fiber, water availability, electricity. Do you have load shedding or are you sort of close to off the grid? And then schooling for your kids, that's also very important. So yeah, that'll sum it up from my side.
Okay, and Akashini, what would you say people need to look out for if they want to action semigration or they just want to semigrate to another area?
Absolutely, Kali. I think that so semigration is such a wonderful concept, and it's a wonderful thing that brings you that lifestyle that you need. But I think, like Bevan is saying, you got to look at things unemotionally as possible. And so doing your research on exactly the market, the type of town that you want to live in is really important. Also, from a cultural perspective, it could be very different if you're coming from a Durban or if you're coming from a Johannesburg. Culturally, a landscape is very different, and taking to that landscape might also need time for a person to adjust to. So that's an important consideration. Services are an important consideration. And then lastly, also understanding the prices of properties and running your numbers effectively, because the property prices within the Cape are on average much more expensive. The levies are much higher. So it could be a shock if you come here and you're looking at the size versus the price and all of that. So you'd have to do some research and just familiarize yourself with as much of that as possible, and reach out to myself or other agents, as many people as possible who've done this, and I think you're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much to our guest. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to get into contact with either Jade regarding his development for organization of farmland, or Akashini in terms of maybe possibly also wanting to semigrate please do not hesitate to contact support at SA Property Network, and we will put you in contact with our guests, including Bevan, who is our facilities golden nugget expert. But I want to say, as stated, looking forward to seeing you ladies on the 12th of August for our annual Women's Day event. It's going to be huge. It's going to be fantastic. Like Donald Trump would say, it's going to be so big. But I'm looking forward to that. Please get your tickets on our website. There's still a few more tickets left. And thank you to Akashini for being a phenomenal woman on Women's Month. And thank you to Jade and Bevan for being phenomenal men during Women's Month. As always, I want to say from me to you, see you next week.